Welcome to Age Hackers, powered by Gladden Longevity with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is to help you live young for a lifetime. On this show, we want to help you optimize your longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering three questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? And how do we live well beyond 120? I'm Steve Reiter and Dr. Gladden. We just wrapped up with Ryan Fredrick from Here.life, talking about optimizing your living spaces and your life for life.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a really interesting conversation because we know that the environment that we put ourselves in either pushes us in the right direction or pushes us in the wrong direction. And so kind of thinking about that very intentionally with Ryan, getting his take on it, looking at it through a number of different lenses, became a really, really interesting conversation. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you two were going back and forth, and you guys were just having a great conversation. And I chimed in towards the end about how I've done this in my life, unbeknownst, and starting to think about, okay, for my next living space, I'm definitely going to be thinking about the kinds of things that were talked about.
Exactly. Good stuff. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Age Hackers podcast, powered by Gladden Longevity. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, and I'm here with, as usual, Steve Reiter. Steve, what's new in your world?
Just getting ready to drop my boys off at the airport on Saturday to send them to Wisconsin to spend a week with my parents. And then I'm going to Silverton, which is in the very southwest part of Colorado, to spend 4 days backpacking up in the mountains and hitting up some alpine lakes and maybe knock out Mount Sneffels, which is a 14er. And
beautiful.
Yeah, I'm stoked for that early next week.
Love it. Yeah, good. Well, the surf came up here today, so I was out doing some body surfing this morning. That felt good to get back in the ocean again. So all good here too.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm excited for this podcast today. We have a really interesting gentleman with us, Ryan Fredrick. And Ryan is basically the CEO of SmartLiving360. But what's really interesting about Ryan is that he's focused on creating places and spaces, if you will, for people to, I'll say, well, we'll let him tell what he's actually up to. But I think it's really the idea of how people are going to live young for a lifetime. We'll take it to that and see where we go. So, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this. You know, you've done several things in your life here, and yet you kind of happened into trying to create spaces for people to thrive in, so to speak. What led you to all that?
You know, I wish it was part of a master plan, but it
never is.
It never is. Yeah, right. No. So this is a bit more of a right turn than I was expecting. My background in undergrad was in electrical engineering, and I worked in Silicon Valley for a few years, and then actually worked for a company. This is in the .com days. Worked for a company that I was a relatively early employee. We went public, and I was like, geez, this business thing is pretty easy. And then,
piece of cake, man.
Piece of cake. Yeah, totally. And then we had an ethical scandal in our company. So we had about a handful of people go to jail, cook the books as part of it, insider trading. Oh, wow. And really threw me for a loop. Like, what do I want to do with my life? Who do I want to do it with? And went back to business school at Stanford. And Stanford, they encourage you to dream big. And I took a step back and said, well, what is something I can really get my heart and head into? I thought more about the mega trend of longevity. It's about 20 years ago now. And so I spent a summer, wrote letters to people in senior housing. I didn't know anyone. Place didn't matter anything to me, really. But I wanted to see, for example, what was it like for people later in life, and then what role did place have in that? And that experience.
So when you talk about later in life, so what are we talking about? Retirement communities, or what were you actually envisioning?
This was retirement communities. Yeah, I mean, these people really in their 70s. This particular actually lived in a community for about a month. In Atlanta.
You lived in a retirement community?
I did. Yeah. I was the only male, only person under 75 in my wing. So I got, Got a lot of unsolicited cookies, brunch invitations.
There you go. Exactly.
My wife elected not joining me.
People hitting on you, probably.
Yeah. I was married, but that didn't trouble my wife.
That's not going to stop anybody, right?
But I get exposed to that, and that's led to this journey since then, which is thinking a lot more about what are the implications of people living longer, more people living to 100. As you talk about, 50% of kids born today will expected to live to 100. And then what is the role that place has physically, literally, but also figuratively? Are you with your people? Do you have purpose? Are you socially connected? A bunch of factors, of course, that matter. And that has led to a book that came out about a year or so ago for consumers. So a lot of the work that I do, in fact, the brand is it's Here, Here is the name of the company. And it's a mix of helping people think about why place matters in such a significant way for their, not just longevity, but their correspondingly long health span and wealth span. Right. Living longer by itself isn't necessarily a good thing. And then on the other hand, helping developers, real estate investors, health systems create better places for people to thrive across the continuum. So I look at it as this overall umbrella of where longevity, or really healthy longevity, meets place. And then how can we help people make better informed decisions, and how can we create better places?
So your book is entitled Right Place, Right Time, The Ultimate Guide to Choosing a Home for the Second Half of Life. Did I get that right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. And so I haven't read the book, but walk us through a little bit. There's got to be some elements there, some questions I would think that you would start with to try to figure out what that's going to look like for an individual, right? You're really, what we're talking about here is kind of architecting your own future, not just going into a house because it's pretty or it's aesthetically appealing to you, but how do you actually architect space to what I would call support the mission, right? Of how we're gonna live. Are we gonna live young? We're gonna get old here. We're gonna, what are we gonna do here, right? So is that a little bit what you're thinking?
Yeah. I'll unpack a little bit of it for you. I would say the first thing is this thesis that, like I mentioned moments ago, that living longer isn't necessarily a good thing if it isn't necessarily matched with a correspondingly long kind of health and financial resources. So seems like that's what many of us are trying to solve for. It's similar to making the 100 the new 30. It's implicitly the same idea, is longer and healthier, but also financially well. And the good news is, about the research, is that your genetics only account for at most 20% of your longevity. It's much more about lifestyle and environment. And so wise decisions there throughout your life impact not only the quality of your life in the moment, but provides a good tail to your health and well-being long-term. That's the overarching kind of thesis. Now, when I say place, I don't mean just the four walls of your apartment, your house, condo. I don't mean that. That's part of it. But it's really a composite of those four walls plus the block that you live in, the neighborhood you're part of, the metropolitan area. Are you in an urban, suburban, rural area? The state, region of the country, region of the world. It's all of those different things make up your day-to-day lived experience, impacts your well-being. So you might have four walls, that were for you, Dr. Gladden, but you might find out that you're not connected to your neighbors the way you used to be. You don't have a sense of belonging. Yeah. A recent study came out around belonging. Only said 26% of people have a sense of belonging in their neighborhoods. Or you might find that the politics of your state have changed. It's not aligned with what you care about in different ways. So place has these number of factors, but going back to this idea of what the agency you have around lifestyle and environment, where you live not only is important to meet your physical needs and your emotional and psychological, but also it influences indirectly your purpose. It influences your social connection. It influences how active you are, your sleep, and so on. And then also for many people, it's one of the biggest cost areas of their life, but also one of their biggest assets. So it's, in a way, it's like this really big thing that's like hidden in sight that we don't talk enough about, in my opinion.
See, I think it's, to me, if you're going to look at something like this, you've got to sort of start with the ends in mind. I won't say the end because we're not talking about end of life, but we're talking about what is it that you want to accomplish in a space, right? It's like, it's almost like building an office. Like, what do you actually want to do there, right? Or you could ask yourself, if I'm going to be here, what does success look like? What are the elements of being here that equate to success or thriving and of course, part of that would be actualizing your sense of purpose, being able to actualize your relationships, being able to optimize your, politics, if that's important to you, your religious affiliations, if that's a piece of it too. But then also your physical activity, your health. How do you, if you look at that through that lens, all of a sudden, there's architecture around the building itself, but there's a lot of, to your point, there's a lot of architecture about what state you put that in, what altitude you put or elevation you put that at, all that kind of stuff, right?
You nailed it. And I think what typically happens is we fly at too low an altitude, to follow your metaphor, that we look at our four walls and say, well, does this meet my physical needs right now?
Right.
Where in fact, if we're really trying to architect a life that we can thrive over a longer horizon, it may be that your social connections or lack thereof are far more important than your four walls, but is highly correlated to place and the people that you know or don't know. So I advocate, and I go through this in the book, and then there's a self-assessment on the here.life website that was in the book, but people enjoyed it so much, I decided to create a version, that people could, and it takes a couple minutes, and you're able to self-assess your life in the areas. What are some of the questions?
What are some of the questions on that assessment, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, well, it breaks into four categories. So there's place, there's purpose, there's social connection, physical well-being, and then financial well-being. So
I think that's 5.
So that's 5 areas. Yeah, those are the 5 areas.
Okay.
The actual questions within them, with place, it would be like, do you feel emotionally connected to where you live? That's kind of getting at home. Does your current home meet your physical needs or those that stay with you? And that's probing a little bit on whether universal design is something that's significant, in your home. On the social connection, on the purpose side, it gets this idea, do you have something that you can point to that's bigger than yourself that you can lean into on a daily basis? That would be one of the questions in the purpose area. On the social connection piece, each of those areas has 5 questions. But one of them there would be like, how well do you know your neighbors, or how often do you see, your close friends on a regular basis? On the physical well-being, one of the questions gets just simply, how active are you on a regular basis? Some people's homes, they're able to walk right outside their front door and do things. Otherwise, for other people, there's hurdles, or the weather's, complicated. It makes it difficult times of year. And the last one, the financial well-being, something that, number of questions again, but one of the areas I push there is, are you financially prepared for 100-year life? Are you getting outside advice on this? Because it's pretty complicated these days. So to expect that you're going to be able to get all the levers right on your own may not be realistic. So it is the assessment is an effort to work at a higher altitude on place.
I can see that assessment working kind of in 2 contexts. One would be kind of a reality check, so to speak. Where am I today? And the other would be an aspirational context of, where would I like to be, right?
Yeah.
And so, you could probably do that assessment looking at it through both those lenses, and that might actually give anybody a pretty good idea of kind of where the gaps are, which would be kind of interesting in and of itself.
So what it does is, I did this in the book and then, created online, similar idea, but what it does online is it, based on your answers, pre-populates a bar graph for you. So you can see visually where there might be gaps relative to what you could potentially be. And then a series of recommendations depending on where you fall on this. As this has unfolded, Dr. Gladden, part of what's happened is I've beta tested based on people's feedback, a workshop, because the assessment is a point in time. it isn't necessarily like what you think the future is going to unfold. And so beta tested a workshop, and then based in person, real estate agents hosted along with wealth advisors did a virtual version. And then based on that feedback, have beta tested a course that just wrapped up just before the summer. And feedback, and the idea is the course, you have 4 different sessions. There's videos, you get to learn from other people in the cohort, and then you walk away with a right place plan. Typically about 10 to 12 pages. Okay, here's, and uses design thinking principles. So it helps you broaden your thinking. It's not just how to optimize necessarily where I'm right now, but what if I did this? You know, what if Steve decided to move to the mountains full time, for example? What would that life look like? Even if that's not viable at the moment, it encourages, it encourages this thinking more broadly. And so now the plan is to make that commercially available here in the fall as ways for people that are interested. If you want to go deeper, if you're like, okay, I see a gap and I want to do something about that, and I want to roll my sleeves up, because it can be a challenge, because you want to. I advocate using design thinking principles because it helps you think broadly about in what ways could your life be different, and then what are some ways to test some of these ideas.
Right. So, you know, the book title talks about for the second half of your life, but on some level that almost seems like an artificial demarcation, right? I mean, why couldn't this happen early in life, right? I mean, example being my son and his wife, and they have 3 kids currently. They're thinking about a 4th down the road here a little bit, but you know, they found a home. They live in Denver. They found a home they love. They're right next to a park. The kids have easy access to all kinds of stuff. There's mountain biking right out the back door or the front door. They're actually changing the front yard into a garden, but not a particularly traditional garden. It's going to basically be one of these integrated gardens where there's many, many different plants that all kind of feed each other. I forget what it's called. It's almost like a food forest. So they have fruit trees, and they've got different plants and all this stuff that's kind of well thought out. They have a beehive in there, all these different things to kind of, you know, pollinate. Then Chris has built, he's built a pump track in the backyard for biking. They've got a big sandbox back there for the kids and stuff like that. I mean, it's just like what they're doing is they're actually architecting the life that they want to lead on the planet they want to live in, doing what they want to do, being close to what they want to do. And they have a great neighborhood, you know, with a lot of kids the same age, of course, and kids really make friends for you, quite honestly. So, you know, they have lots of friends, and I think they're really architecting like a great life and a great space. Now, that being said, could it be better? Yes, it could be better. You know, I can see ways that, you know, it'd be better if you had some couple different things, but I never say that because they're architecting their world, and it's their world. So that's fine. But I think this idea of being very, very intentional about thinking outside the box, right? I mean, we think about a house, we think about a yard, we think about trees, we think about stuff. But what if you just ripped all that stuff open and said, no, I want to live right next to a trout stream, and I want to, you know, do this or do that, or I want to, you know, I mean, all of a sudden, I think it would give people a lot of freedom, if you will, to start to go through this. So my point is that when people have gone through your course, do they start to think in these kind of more out-of-the-box terms? Is that kind of one of the net effects of it?
Yeah, and you have a couple great points in there, Dr. Gladden. Like the first one I just want to double-click on, and that is the book was written for the second half of life because that was a response to a lot of my work experience. Yeah. Like I know a lot of developers and projects and how these things work, particularly and I bet I've developed intergenerational communities. But when the book came out, my PR firm, they came back and they're like, well, actually, Ryan, this topic, the principles you outline, there's no reason why it can't apply to people who are younger. And there's quite a number of Gen Zs and millennials, particularly in this world of hybrid or remote working, that have more degrees of freedom now. And I said, you're right. And so the assessment on the here.life website is, it's age agnostic when you go through it. And thousands of people have taken the assessment, people of different ages. So you're totally right about that. On the second piece around thinking more broadly, it's a really important point. And I would say that's a bigger struggle I found for people in the second half of life, because there's a tendency just kind of get in this rhythm of kind of how you do things. And then in some cases too, it can be complicated because you might have, if you're coupled up, one person might have more out of the box thinking and desire, and the other may not, may have different risk profiles. But when people are able to take a step back, when they're able to think in terms of like experiments, I don't necessarily have to like overnight get rid of my old life and create this new one, but instead find ideas that I can lean into and then have like controlled experiments to see if that big move to buy the trout farm or creek is the right thing for me. Like, I think that I think helps encourage the thinking, because then people don't immediately say, well, I could never do that because, hold on, let's back this up for a second. You could, but what are the things that you'd want to test out to see if that's the right thing for you? The other element to this too is, you think about a couple of generations ago, if you were at quote unquote retirement age, say that was 65, what was your assumed duration of life at that point?
It's about 6 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Something
now
like
might
that.
be. I did a podcast with Stanford Center on Longevity last week. Like, it could be decades, at this point. So it says, wait a second, it could be a long time. And if I make, not only if I architect it wisely, like you described, not only may I enjoy the number of those early years better, actually, they might improve the odds that I live longer and healthier too. So I totally agree. It's a kind of a pivot moment, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think one of the things that, if you have somebody, let's say you are coupled up and you have somebody that's more, let's call it adventurous, out of the box thinker, somebody that's a little bit more, likes to keep things the way they are, so to speak. I think if you think about this in the abstract before you get concrete, it can actually help. What I mean by that is that if you start to think about, well, where do we want, if you're asking very specific questions, I'm speaking to the audience here, right? If you're thinking about this, if you're taking very specific things like, well, where do we want to live? And how many square feet do we want to have? And these very specific kinds of things, it kind of narrows your focus into getting those kinds of answers. But if you're asking, I think, more abstract questions like, what quality of life do we want to have? What ease of access to friends do we want to have? What ease of access to exercise do we want to have? How healthy do we want to be? How many minutes a week do we want to be outside? All these kinds of things. If you start to think about it abstractly before you narrow it down, I think all of a sudden, even for somebody that's a little more conservative in their thinking, you'll start to realize that, hey, there's some options here that, I wasn't thinking about, but this could be really terrific. Right. So, you nailed it. And I think part of it too, that we fight right now when we are focused on encouraging people to lean into this century life concept, is we've got these headwinds related to ageism that says, okay, tomorrow I'll be a lesser person than I am today. That's part of the normative culture message. Yeah, and that's the normalization of aging in society, right?
It is society. However, I do a biweekly blog on the here.life website, really around healthy longevity and often where it intersects with place. And one of the topics I did a bit of time ago was on the U-shaped happiness curve, which has been proven internationally. And that is, you're a certain level of happiness in your 20s, and then you have this somewhat precipitous decline in the US to your late 40s, about 50. I'd like to think it may be somehow correlated to teenagers in the house. And then you work your way up. And so people in their 70s and 80s, their self-reported happiness or well-being is greater in their 70s and 80s than it was at any point in their life prior. And so part of what that points to then is to say, well, wait a second, you take that image and then you map it to the fact that roughly 90% of people, they say they want to age in place. And age in place, what that typically connotes is you stay in the same dwelling, often a suburban single family house, and you want to be there for the duration of your years.
I think there's a flip side to that too, though. Let me just throw this out there. You can critique this. this aging in place, I think part of that is, yes, we want to stay in the same place, but I think the other implied thing is that we don't want to be displaced. We don't want to have to move. We don't want to have to move from here into some sort of a facility that we don't want to go to.
Yes.
So I think that's a big piece of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a big piece, but there's two different pieces to that, Dr. Gladden.
Yeah.
Like there's one piece is that going back to one of your core points earlier, that itself means you have blinders on. That you're not asking the larger set of questions that you just went through. You're like, well, actually, it's about optimizing this current life. And it might be that you have like plenty of other better options that would be attractive to you, but you haven't taken the time to sort out what that looks like. The second piece to the point you made, which is somewhat ironic, is that people say they want to age in place, but the vast majority of people don't have their houses just focus strictly on the physical elements of it. They're not designed to support aging in place. Less than 5% of the housing stock in the whole US is designed to support people that may have some limited mobility issue. So if you're planning, I'm going to age in place so I don't have to go over to senior living. Well, ironically, you're actually you might be setting yourself up for an event that happens that gives you no option but yet to go over there, not on the timing that you prefer, but based on like a particular trigger moment. So
yeah, that's right.
So while back to one of your previous points, while my lens initially was coming at this from the second half of life, this whole idea of architecting your life and having place support, what you're looking for is age independent. And then to add one other point to it, it's very much linked to like transitions in life. Either you create or happen. So for example, anytime maybe you are in a different relationship or you have a different job, a number of different things that happen, health event, it naturally raises a question, am I in the right place? And so part of what I'm advocating is there's planning that people do for being financially well over a long life. As you know, there's a practice of seeing physicians on a regular basis. So you're mapping out your health for a long life. I believe everyone should have a place plan that they have some principles, they have where it happens today, but recognize that things change. Your needs and preferences change. If you have a partner, their needs and preferences change, and not to be overlooked, places change. A place may be less attractive. It may be less safe. It may be warmer than it was before. Part of the exercise is this calibration of synchronizing your needs and wants with place. And you got a number of variables that are moving at the same time.
This episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast is brought to you by H2 Molecular Hydrogen in the Gladden Longevity Store.
Yeah, Steve, you've heard us talk about this numerous times on the podcast in terms of the benefits of H2 and hydrogen water. We love it. You know, it's really the best way to balance your entire redox system. So it really protects you from free radical damage. I take it every time I get on a flight to protect me from radiation damage when I'm flying. And I use it to rejuvenate my brain in the afternoon. You know, there's really two kinds of exercise. There's physical exercise, and taking H2 before or after that works great. But also there's mental exercise. And I find that the H2 will bring your brain back when you're tired in the afternoon. So I think it's like the perfect thing for longevity and for performance, quite honestly.
And I talked to you about this, that I found dropping 1 or 2 tablets in a glass of water right before bed. I've seen an overall bump in my deep sleep when I do so.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So if you click on the store tab when you visit GladdenLongevityShop.com and use the promo code podcast10, you'll get 10% off your order. And this code isn't only good for our H2 product, but it's also good for all the supplements we carry. So podcast10 at the GladdenLongevityShop.com.
Yeah, one of the other things that I use it for routinely is when I'm about to go on a mountain bike ride. And I will say this, that if I go on a long mountain bike ride, I will take one prior, I'll take one during, and I'll take one after. And some of the Ironmen that we've worked with have said that when they're doing an Ironman, they'll take it 3 or 4 times throughout the race. And their comment is that it's like taking out the old battery and putting in a new one. it really rejuvenates your body's ability to perform when you're doing more extended athletic activities. So think about that too. If you want to go do a longer hike or whatever else, take it with you.
So GladdenLongevityShop.com, enter podcast 10 for 10% off your order.
H2 molecular hydrogen. It's low-hanging fruit on your quest to make 100 the new 30. I think that's a good point. I also think that it's interesting as to what perspective you take on it. For example, let's say you're at a given age, and you can be looking at this from the standpoint of, how do I create a place that supports me as I get older, which actually is implying as I lose my faculties, so to speak, my capabilities. How do I choose a place that supports me in that process? So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, how do I choose a place that actually enables me to not lose my capabilities or lose my faculties, that helps me to optimize, to live young for a lifetime, if you will? How do I choose that place? Realizing that in choosing that place, you actually can have your cake and eat it too, because you can also create elements to that are sort of safety net elements. But now you're really optimizing your ability to get outside, the ability to ride your bike, the ability to go for your hikes or whatever it is that you love to do, right? Play tennis, whatever it is. I think this is a really interesting thing. And, I've often thought that there would be an opportunity to actually build communities around this kind of synergy where people have a theme, like they want to live green. They want to live, they want to eat organic food. They want to, not have electrical wires running through their backyard. They want to have a clean environment. They want clean air, clean water. They want to be, ecologically sound, if you will. They want to have access to good food. They want safe places for the kids to play. And they also, I think beyond that, instead of having a living room, dining room, kitchen, 3 bedrooms upstairs and a playroom, it's like architecting a space that actually supports a different style of living, right? Like, where's the gym? Where's the music? Where's the things that keep us young, right? And so all of a sudden I can imagine working with real estate developers around something like this, where you'd actually create communities and allow people to actually move into a different style altogether, so to speak.
Yeah. So I'm working with some of those developers right now. So I'll give you a couple things on this. One is back to the earlier point you made. One of the things I advocate in the book and then in the workshop and course is this idea that when you're redesigning, let's say you're redeveloping a house, going through this process.
Yeah.
There are a number of things you can do that effectively create optionality for your use of the house. And I'll just pick on the master bedroom and bathroom, for example. You could go remodel your house and say the master bedroom is on the second floor, as is the master bathroom. What you could do is do that, make the bathroom look attractive and a little more usable. Or what you could do is you could think about, well, how might we be able to seamlessly turn our master bedroom into the first floor? Yeah. When we're designing the bathroom, how can we use slip resistant tile that we use, sure, make it comfort high toilets, it looks the same, have blocking behind the wall for grab bars, have a shower with maybe just a lower lip, has a bench that we can sit on, get a lot of things that people want anyway, but it may make it so that as you're living longer, your house doesn't force you out. Mm-hmm. And like that. And so I think there's an element there of this. How do you create more optionality in your house so you're not forced before you may want to move your house? On the second piece, you nailed it. I mean, we're in a spot right now. The work that I'm doing with here is twofold. It's one, it's helping people think more deeply about making wise decisions to architect their life to live long, healthy, financially secure, and the role that place has in that. That's the book, the workshop, course, etc. On the other hand, I call that the demand side. On the other side is the supply side. How do we create better places? And that means that has implications for zoning at the municipality level. It has implications at the neighborhood level with sidewalks, third places, and it also has as elements within the actual house, that kind of built environment. Mm-hmm. And I'm working with a couple developers that have, for example, that have read my book and said, we want to create this kind of thing that doesn't exist. So one of them, for example, we're doing a development in South Carolina where it's rental cottages that are built in, they're built in little neighborhoods where you have green space in the middle, you have a front porch, you have 1-story living. It's attractive, but the design the space is done such that it meets your needs, but not more. You have like common spaces to get to know each other and also have certain service delivery meals, or at least some meals, etc. And over time, if you do need, if this is a 55 plus community, if you do need some element of care down the road, there are ways those services can be provisioned to come to you. So we've got this, just the implication of what you're describing. You can flip this model upside down on the lived experience level, where for the most part, I'm exaggerating a bit, but in large measure, we have single family homes that were in the suburban areas that were designed as if we would never get older. And then we have these senior living communities that are, homogenous, expect all the services that you want would be there, that people aren't necessarily drawn to. And how can we create a blend of new product, new experiences, new communities, where you're going to have some people that are, you might have some people that are like you're describing earlier, that are very much invested in, okay, this is going to nudge me to eat healthier, to be more active, et cetera. I think there is that pathway, but then there's some other pathways where it's like, actually, I just want to be able to be around people like me. And and I would describe that maybe as the Margaritaville concept, which however you feel about it, has been quite successful because it's brought people in that want to be part of a community, that have the shared parrot head affiliation. They may not necessarily be running a marathon every day, but it's meeting them a bit, where they are in social connection in particular. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to, as I said, to help people make better decisions about place, but also can we just create more places that are better and more appealing?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it can go across the gamut of society, whether you want to sort of be in Margaritaville or you want to be in a community that's really emphasizing youthfulness, if you will, right? Yeah. So you can emphasize comfort, you can emphasize youthfulness, you can emphasize, ecologically, green spaces, whatever you want to call it. So there's lots of different themes, I think, that can go on in this. But I do think the idea of architecting this is important. And I will say this, and you already know this, I know you've said this in your book, but we've discovered this to be true as well. And that is that, really people's success in many respects related to their aspirations as a function of the environment that they reside in. So, for example, how many people go to a Tony Robbins, weekend or whatever they do? I have not been, but, then they're all charged up, right? And then 2 weeks later, really, I think the numbers are 4% of the people are actually doing something. Yeah. And the analysis there is that, people go back to an environment that basically pushes them towards habits that they've already had. And it's really difficult that the environment is not supporting the new mission. The habits are not supporting the new mission. And the next thing 2 weeks later, they had a couple sleepless nights because of travel and this and that, and they're right back to doing what they used to do, right? So really, when I think about this, and I think about this for Gladden longevity clients, is how do we help them architect an environment that actually supports the mission? And so people get really clear on what the mission is, and then you go in and you help them architect that, right? So I think the same is kind of true here also. If people are really clear on what the mission is, and then, you have the ability to help, architect that space, or we have the ability to help people in our end of the spectrum architect that space. I think that becomes a very conscious decision, but I think it's absolutely critical because, the other thing that we've found is that some people have the ability to take information and implement it, right? They can actually create systems and do things. Other people have no real desire to do that. Let's say they may have a capacity, they may not even have a capacity, but they certainly don't have the desire. And they need somebody to come in and actually, go through the pantry, go through the kitchen, go through the bedroom, go through the gym, the office, and architect this thing into how do you succeed here? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. And I think this very conscientious approach to architecting spaces to support the mission, I think is spot on, really. So
you say earlier, how in the world, Ryan, did you go from studying electrical engineering to be in healthy longevity in place? And I do ask myself that question from time to time. But I would say one of the through lines is systems thinking.
That's right.
And that's part of what you're describing. It's like, okay, you're going to we have headwinds that make habit forming really challenging. And your Tony Robbins example, I think, is a really good one. Like, people are well-intended, but then they get back to their prior systems, and their systems let them down. And, James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is really a system book. And so I see places being complementary to what you're talking about, because it fits into those systems. Like, what do you want your life to look like? And it can happen in high altitude ways, going back to that metaphor. Like, okay, if you don't have any good friends where you are and you're having a hard time making friends, it may not matter how much you love your four walls. You simply may be in the wrong place. But it also can go to lower altitude places. Like, okay, I'm just spending too much time watching television at night. Well, maybe one idea is to take that TV out of your bedroom, for example. So I think that there are, like, I talk about it in some ways as a life hack. How can you think about place as a life hack that just makes the things you want to have happen easier? Like, I know there's some interesting research around just catching the habits of your friends. If your friends are obese, you're more likely to be obese. If your friends are depressed, you're more likely to be depressed. I'm not saying you should let go of all your depressed friends. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that intentionality, matters. We've been, my wife and our family, we were in the San Francisco Bay Area for about a decade. We were in the greater Baltimore area for about a decade, and we moved to Austin 4 years ago. And it's interesting to see, like, how we're different, how our friend circles are different depending on the places that you put yourself in. Yeah. And not just at the metropolitan level, like down to the neighborhood level. I remember when we were looking to find a house here in Austin, we were in an apartment initially because we were trying to find the right neighborhood. I biked around because I wanted to know what the feel was by neighborhood, even by block. As it played out. One of the things that I do on a regular basis, it's hot here in Austin, especially during the summer, and there's an open water pool called Barton Springs, natural water. Fish and turtles in there, and it's no coincidence that I can bicycle from our house, go for a hard 30-minute swim, and then bike back, and that's an hour. We made a conscious decision about place that enables that. That's a heck of a lot easier than if I have to drive a half an hour. You just don't do it as much. So it manifests itself, I said, high altitude ways, low altitude ways, but fits nicely into that systematic thinking you were describing around architecting your life.
So let me ask you this. What is it in your home in Austin? What have you architected there that's different than what you had in either Baltimore or San Francisco? Apart from being close to Barton Springs, which is great. I love Austin. I love that town. I love all those walkways along. I think it's the Colorado River that runs through town. But you can bike there. You can run there. Even in the summer when it's warm, it's shaded. If you get out early, it's still super pleasant. I don't know. There's just a nice energy to it, right? You just feel good when you're there. So
I guess I eat my own dog food. And I talk about it a little bit in the book, like the methodology and the principles I describe in the book is what we really used, as it turned out, when we relocated. And what were the things that mattered to us? How could we find those? It impacted the neighborhood we were in, impacted really the school system for our kids.
So in what way did it impact the neighborhood?
We wanted to be in a place that, and obviously affordability is an issue. So we have to kind of triangulate all these things. But we wanted a place that had high degree of walkability. Didn't necessarily mean walkability to stores, although that would be ideal, but more you could just see people were out and about. It was easy to just kind of walk out from your door and kind of and see people, and people got to know their neighbors as part of that concept.
So you're in a neighborhood with sidewalks, I take it, where people walk between homes. Is that
we don't have sidewalks, but we have generally wide streets, and there's limited traffic. A lot of different trees, just people walk around a lot. As a piece of it. There's another piece of it is my wife makes fun of me, but this house has a master bedroom on the first floor. And the way the house is designed, we have 3 kids. Our oldest is going to college next month. It works well for a family of 5. I think it's going to work well as a family too. The way the design, kind of layout is in all of this. We also wanted to be in a place where we were close to downtown, but also closer to our grocery store, doctors, pharmacy, et cetera. There's this concept of the 15-minute neighborhood or 20-minute neighborhood, 15-minute city that people are talking about. Where can you go that either can walk, bike, e-bike, take public transportation? We can e-bike, for example, to pretty much anything. We're just the way we're located. And e-bikes, by the way, I don't think people talk enough about. We talk about these cars and Tesla and these different things. There were more e-bikes sold last year than there were e-vehicles, for cars.
Yeah.
It's like
e-bikes are amazing.
They're amazing. It all of a sudden opens up people's worlds in a way that was more challenging, especially if there's hills and so on. So we've done it. We did a remodel. So we've done it at the detailed level. We have, for in our situation, we don't have a TV except in our den. So we wanted to make sure we did things that were conducive to social connection.
So tell me about your remodel. What did you remodel?
I like to joke it was a pandemic version of remodel. I thought it was just started in, it was only one room and then it kind of hit everything. Apparently that was less of a surprise to my wife. But yeah, what we did is it was a house in Baltimore was from the 80s. A house here in Austin was from the 80s. It's just in Baltimore is 1880s. Austin is 1980s. So there were some things that we did to make it more like attractive from the outside, from the inside, made bigger windows. We did more insulation, thinking about energy costs and so on. A lot more windows to have the outside in. We blew out one of the main rooms. So it was a space that was more conducive for gatherings. We have a long table that we introduced in that room. So that we've used for a number of different homes. So we can gather, it works fine for 5, but it works great for 14. We created an island that we can cook on together as a family, but also has chairs that are there for people to use. We created dedicated, we carved out some spaces. So we have dedicated workspaces for my wife and I. So it's a number, in terms of on the first, we created a guest room on the first floor that has universal design principles, some of which I described earlier. So it's easier for our parents to come visit us. We have a landscape architect we worked with. We created a pathway in from our driveway. So there's no stairs as one option. So you can come in, take advantage of what our house is about and really have no stairs to manage it all. So it's a number of different elements, Dr. Gladden, that impacting the remodel, but the idea that, location is so important. We optimize for location first and then dealt with the actual housing. Okay.
So I'm getting that there isn't a home gym in there or that kind of stuff.
There is. Yeah. We have it in our garage. So we've got a treadmill. We've got a TV that's set up with Apple TV that my wife right now is in she's going through an aerobics kick. So she's got, jazzercise in particular. She's doing that stuff. We've got free weights. We got a punching bag. So yeah, there's some, but we're also really close. There's, like you point out, there's the pool, but we're close to the greenbelt. So we can just bike to the greenbelt and do running or hiking there. And that's accessible to us.
Yeah, I think this is nice. So what you're talking about really is kind of a combination of efficiency and ease of use, right? So it becomes effortless and efficient. I think the more that we can make spaces that are both efficient and effortless in their support of the mission, I think this is, really, really good. So you can, when I was designing cath labs, and I ended up helping to design a heart hospital that we built and things like that, one of the things that I would focus on was how many steps does the family have to take to get from here to there? How many steps do I have to take from the cath table to be able to speak with the family? How many steps do I have to do? How many steps does the staff have to do, right? So you start to think in terms of efficiency and effortlessness, and when you get that flow right, all of a sudden everybody enjoys being in that space. And so I think, and certainly if you had an injury, to be able to be on the first floor and get to the kitchen easily and get back, or whatever, all that stuff starts to really add up. So as the audience is listening about this, I think if you want to, think about what do you really want to do in this space? Do you want to support your youthfulness? Do you want to have it on the back end, be adaptable if something were to happen? And then how do you make it, effortless and efficient to support the mission? I think those would be the things to start to think about. At least those are the things that I would start to think about.
I think you're totally right. I mean, part of it is knowing the human condition, and part of the human condition is that we're lazy.
Yeah.
And so the more that we can create easy things to happen that that nudge you to who you want to be anyway.
That's right.
And that happens on a regular basis. It's that whole principle of getting 1% better every day. And that's just right. Kind of doing the right stuff. And if you make it hard, you're just less likely to do it. And so I think that, and it comes in these different forms. It's actually in the house. It's in the neighborhood. You describe like the ethos. Austin's not the right place for everyone, but for people that do want to be part of the energy, part of the entrepreneurial vibe, it's easier when it already exists as opposed to trying to create it in a place that it doesn't.
Yeah, that's right.
And so and again, if your life wasn't so long, you wouldn't care as much about it. But when you've got this longer life and it's impacted by these decisions, like you literally could be a much different person who lives longer, healthier by just making this wise decision about place and having the compound returns over time than being a spot that's the wrong place for you and having to, fight against it all the time.
I think one of the other things that's important to me as I think about this, and I think about the places that I currently live in, is that I want them to be inspiring, right? I want to look out a window and be inspired by what I see. That's very, very important to me. So I think also, as the audience is listening to this, there's also a sense of aesthetic that goes into this, right? Make it beautiful, make it inspiring, have a view. If you have a view and the windows aren't pointed that way, just, if you're remodeling, make it inspiring so that when you get up in the morning, like for me, when I get up and I journal, the first thing I do is I journal and then I meditate and things like that. But I sit in front of a view that's just like, oh my God, it's so inspiring, right? And so, it just makes, I just want to be there, right? And so if you can encourage all that aesthetic joy that comes from being in a beautiful thing that's inspiring, that's really, really cool. So.
It is, and I think there's most people aren't going to physically move, and most people shouldn't physically move. But one of the key things is you can make your current place better.
Oh, for sure.
And one of the things that we're doing right now is we value travel. And so we've traveled a number of places as a family. Yep. And a little project for my daughter before she heads to college next month is we're creating a space. We're just calling it the People and Places. It's the game room, but it's really people and places. And we've got just these amazing pictures and adventures, and we're going to showcase these.
Oh, I see. Okay. So this is family trips that you're
and so there's a wall that we have pictures of our family related to this. We have maps on another wall. We've got maps and flags of places we've been, and it fits that same idea of you're walking into something that speaks to you emotionally. Yeah. It reinforces this sense, because house isn't necessarily home. And how can we encourage and evoke the emotional and psychological attachment, in a good way. And that can be a view for sure. But for those that either aren't drawn that way or don't have a view, there's other ideas I talk about, even simply the idea of introducing color to a room, rearranging your furniture. Those smaller, less expensive ways can reinvigorate
for sure.
We can reinvigorate a spot.
Yeah, an accent wall can do magic, right? Or actually a beautiful piece of art, or even a TV that plays art for that. I mean, you can have any art piece in the world on your wall, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's many ways to create that inspiring thing, but I think it's important not to get so functional that you miss the aesthetics and the inspiration of it all, right? You like to be inspired. When I think about your game room, that's really kind of a room documenting your travels and things. I wonder, is there also an element where you actually plan your next trip in that room? Like, we've been here, but we kind of want to go there.
So we have a map that we're putting up that, has, it's a world map, and we have different pins. And so our plan is to, okay, well, where's someone else? Where's someplace that we haven't been to that I'd like to, or we're encouraging our middle son just came back from 3 weeks in Buenos Aires. He's a rising junior in high school, and he was awesome. He was just immersed, got to meet and become friends with locals there. And so it's not just like our whole family traveling. It's like components of where do you want to go? And so I think it in that case, I would just, our intent anyway, it hasn't been delivered just yet, but our intent is to inspire bigger thinking. Yeah. And through place.
Beautiful. Well, it's really been a lovely conversation with you, Ryan. I really appreciate your perspective on this. I think for the audience, I think many people take their place for granted, so to speak. The house is the house. It is what it is. But I think rethinking it from the standpoint of how does it support, a mission of youthfulness, and how does it support a mission of, maybe something does happen to us where we need to be supported in different ways, right? And then if you're not happy where you are, I think architecting your future in a different way than maybe the way you did to get where you currently are.
Yeah. I look at it, and for some reason, it's this really big decision that's in some cases just hidden in plain sight. Like, we just look past it. Yeah. I believe that if you're focused on trying to optimize a healthy, long, financially secure, socially connected life, start with place. And Dr. Gladden, I hear your point. You might actually start with what do you want your future to look like? What does that magic state look like? That's right. It's similar. Well, how can place enable that? And sure, maybe you want to exercise more, or you want to be a little bit healthier. True. But place helps inform a lot of that. Exactly. And so I think if more people see the power of place, recognize it doesn't mean that it's this huge thing that you can't overcome. There are baby steps in this, some of which we outlined in our conversation, that this nudges you to, ultimately a better life, for you. And then if we can at the same time create better places, so there's more alternatives for people for what they're looking for, I think ultimately our individuals benefit, but I think our society at large benefits as well.
Yeah, agreed. So if people want to get more information, where do they go to learn more about what you're doing, get a copy of your book, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a couple things. I would encourage people to visit the HERE website, which is HERE, HERE.life, the HERE.life website. There you'll see a prompting if you're interested. Take that assessment. I think the assessment's a great first place to start. Like, where am I in my this snapshot in time, kind of where am I? And then there will be increasingly opportunities if you're interested to lean into a workshop or a course. There's a blog that you can sign up for to get content every other week. And this kind of subject matter, that's probably I think a good place for people to start. But what I'm envisioning here, Dr. Gladden, is that if people are optimizing for healthy longevity, place is part of the equation. And so finding ways in which some of this content and tools can be webbed into more physician practices, wealth advisors, life coaches, it's just in the water. Like I see this being something that can have a really big step function for people to just lean into this because it matters so significantly.
Beautiful. Steve, any comments?
No, I mean, this is something that I kind of went through myself a year after my wife died. I needed to remodel the entire upstairs because it was just, I needed to make the house mine. and tore out all the carpets, put in some hardwood floors, got new furniture. It really made the house for the boys and I. And in particular, when you say modeling your home, I got a big ass couch. So that way my boys could have their friends over and a big TV so they could play video games. And, and I would often, I mean, Dr. Gladden, this last school year, every Friday night during the school year, there were at least a half dozen teen boys over at my house, and they were jumping between my sauna and my cold plunge, and I was coaching them on the cold plunge. And then they'd take breaks and do video games, and they'd ride the Carol bike and lift weights on the tonal. And that's what I wanted to make my house after Elizabeth passed. And so, Ryan, you talking about this makes me kind of think, okay, at whatever point I eventually remarry, I definitely want to be thinking about this, modeling a house for the kind of life that I want to have.
Yeah, Steve, that's powerful. You know, I think that it's awesome to see how you've modeled it the way you have. I think that part of this is for some people right now, for pretty much everyone to do it yourself exercise, right? Okay. Here's what I think. And I think some people are able to do that. It's harder for others. So the more that we can just make it easier for people to say, okay, how should I think different about how to execute on? I think more people will create better places for the life that they're designing.
Very cool. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Gladden. Thank you, Steve.